Hello and welcome back to another conversation. And this time we are going to talk about A Horse and Two Goats by R.K. Narayan. It's a really heartwarming, tragic comic story about a villager in the deep south in the Indian subcontinent. So I have here Gayatri with me, who's an MA student, and she has a couple of questions for me, and we're going to discuss the story. Hey,
Hello,
Gayatri.
ma'am.
Hello.
R.K. Narayan's stories have always been a pleasure to read. From the beginning, when our generation, we've been growing up with Malgudi days and all that.
Yeah.
And thank you for introducing this story here. So let's start with a couple of questions. The significance of the word Creedom, the place where Muni lives in the protagonist.
Yeah.
Creedom means crown
Yes.
in Tamil.
Mm.
So, but it's very ironical because it's so irrelevant, and the way he describes its irrelevance is very nice.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of the?
It's highly ironic, as you mentioned. Creedom suggests glory, grandeur, a lot of wealth and power, and none of these adjectives seem to apply to this particular village, and especially to the central character Muni, whom we are concerned about in this story. In fact, we can even go back to R.K. Narayan's own words about how he describes this small village. He himself says that, but its size did not prevent its giving itself the grandiose name Creedom, which meant in Tamil coronet or crown on the brow of this continent. The village consisted of less than 30 houses, only one of them built with brick and cement. So it's highly ironic. There is not a lot of common grandeur amongst the villages. It's just one house, the big house, which is built in a large scale with brick and cement. The rest of the villagers, only 30 villages or so, living in really small houses made of thatch and mud. So and again, it's very, very insignificant. It's just a dot on the map, and that dot too has been apparently created on the map to make sure the revenue collector comes and gets the taxes. So it's a very, very interesting title in that regard, and it suggests a kind of an exaggerated sense of self-worth that the villagers have about themselves, about their lifestyles. And even the neighboring villages, what's the name, Kuppam, right?
Yeah.
That's supposed to be containing all the bad guys, whereas this one has important people like Avayar supposedly, and things like that. So it's a very interesting title in that regard.
And one more brilliance of R.K. Narayan, the motto of for the foreigner to visit India.
Yeah.
How he exoticizes it, how he says that one day there was no electricity.
Yeah.
And he says it to Muni, who lives like this, who has been living like this for so long.
Yeah.
He-
Yeah.
For him, it's the other way around. So,
that premise for getting up and coming out all the way to India seems to be on a really flimsy ground from the Indian point of view. He says that he didn't have electricity or something for a while in his workplace, and he suddenly thinks that they are ready to visit India. He and his wife are ready to visit. I don't know why. Perhaps that that experience of living with electricity kind of gets them ready to visit this hot subcontinent or something. But it's a very simplistic rationale that we have, and as you said, people like Muni, most of the population in the villages have been living without electricity for ages together, and again, the power of this businessman from New York, who could drop everything and leave and
Exactly.
travel. It suggests his wealth and power in that regard, and they can just get their heart's desire because they are very capable of, the financial capability makes them do such things.
no, it seems like he exoticizes this place. Very typical to a Westerner who very typical attitude, but when he comes here, he does very little to actually understand
Yes.
the psyche of the people who are here.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's very narrow-minded. He just doesn't want to listen to what he says. As soon as he sees the house, all he wants to do is get the house for himself. It's a very materialistic
Yeah.
way of thinking.
Absolutely. There are several things in what you've just said. He doesn't understand the Indian way of life. That's for certain, because he assumes that everybody in India will speak the language,
Yes.
because he has got through this far with that, help apparently. And he says, Everyone in this country seems to know English. I've got along with English everywhere in this country, but don't you speak it? Have you any religious or spiritual scruples for avoiding the English speech? So his assumption is pretty wrong in the first place. No, not everybody in this country speak the language. And the other question, which tells us that he partially understands the cultural and the spiritual mindset of the people, because he thinks that religious and spiritual scruples will prevent the local population from doing certain things which are quite common for the Western or the non-Indian populations, right? So it is a half-baked kind of understanding about the Indian lifestyle, and the classic example of how he doesn't understand really the spiritual strata of the Indian psyche is his attitude towards the clay horse. For him, it's just a marvelous piece of architecture or sculpture. We have the horse and the warrior on a big pedestal, and that pedestal almost serves as a kind of a home space for Muni. But for this figure, it's just an aesthetic object, right? Something that he can just take away by picking at the cement which attaches the horse to the pedestal. And the repetition of the word marvelous, that's the word that keeps coming up once again, right? So again, he's limited. Even in his aesthetic appreciation, he's limited because there is no varied vocabulary there. That's one thing. And then he says, you don't have to spend too much time talking about the finer points of the horse. I know about this horse more than anybody. I can do a fine sales talk than anybody else. How on earth can you do that? You don't even understand the context for this horse. Muni has a very, very, a vast kind of context in which he places this horse, and how it would come to life at the end of time, and how it is associated with the various religious and mythical, subset of Indian culture. So even though he's a very simplistic villager, he has this rich body of knowledge about the cultural and the spiritual traditions of this place. And this guy who has just arrived in India, he thinks that he knows everything. So that really kind of justifies your point that he has no big understanding of the Indian.
It's a very stereotypical Western attitude towards the East. And also talking about his attitude, let's contrast both their attitudes towards life itself. As I already mentioned, I think from my perspective, I think the foreigner is very materialistic, while he is very spiritual. He just goes on monologues of how time is very cyclical, and by the end of the time karma will come, all this. So could you contrast attitudes?
Muni, as I said, looks at life through the spiritual lens in one way or the other, because he believes that God will ultimately save us from evil beings. There will be a comeuppance for all these criminals, bad guys at the end of the day, when this world is coming to an end, and Vishnu in his various avatars will come and rescue the good people, and even the horse itself will come to life and save the good people on its back, whereas it will trample down the evil people. It is a kind of a philosophical and a spiritual attitude towards life, whereas we have a materialistic perspective from this American businessman in coffee. And he from his monologues, we understand that he spends time cutting up driftwood and making a big fire in his house. He has big bookcases, he has a big TV, and all that will be kind of moved away to make space for this object from India. And he thinks that when they're going to have a party, they can stand around the statue and enjoy their drink. And he doesn't think about the mismatch of this particular object from this oriental space and its presence in his living room. It doesn't make much sense, because he has no understanding about the source of where this significance for this horse comes from. For him, it's just a clay horse with bright colors.
Maybe it just adds to its aura because of its mysticism. He doesn't know where, if maybe somebody comes and asks him, where does it come from? What's its source? He wouldn't know, and he would say it's from the east, and everybody would actually understand that if it's from the east, then it's something exotic.
Yes.
And there would be no source. It must be 100 years old or 200 years old.
Yeah.
So the understanding towards ease is very, as you said, half-baked and very problematic.
Yeah. We can understand that he's this American has a very impulsive sort of attitude towards life. You know, he thinks that he's going to cancel his air tickets and then jump on a boat and travel back. And he says his wife can think about, you know, flying by air back home, but I'm going to hug this horse and then enjoy being with the horse in a cabin all the way back home. So it's almost like a childlike enthusiasm for novelty, and this horse is all but a novelty for him, right? It's nothing but a novelty. So so this collector's attitude is there, and when it is an object from the east, we are inevitably reminded of the plunder that has gone on in all these colonized spaces by these western presences, which have been intrusions, not welcome presences anyway, historically speaking. So taking away this cultural spiritual object from its place is
without
almost
knowing the context.
yes, without knowing the context. And he's not even sure that Muni understands the deal, you know, and the narrative doesn't tell us, you know, whether Muni completely understands. And that's where the problem lies. This man gets what he wants, and he's willing to throw away money at it, right, to get his heart's desire. And the kind of the chasm between the east and west, that stereotype is also there in this particular story. And it's almost as we were talking before, it's almost a thievery, a robbery that's going on, you know, because this innocent villager doesn't know, and it's not his property, it's a cultural property. It's a property of the villagers who invest a lot of spiritual faith in this horse and the warrior. They're supposed to be guardians, right?
And look at the arrogance, I don't know if I could call it arrogance, of the Westerner. He comes and he says, I could take better care of this. This was here for so long. And he just comes in and says, I could take better care of this. Again, when you look at the bigger picture of India itself, they just came in and they thought, I could take better care of this place. This place is so rich in culture, tradition and all that. But the thing which is rich, they suppressed it for their own means.
Absolutely. So instead of the horse and the warrior figure playing the guardians for the local population, we have the American who is kind of wresting that responsibility from the villagers without their acceptance, without any kind of contract being agreed to. That's one thing. And as you said, you know, he says he could take care of it better, and he says he has the best home in USA. This horse will have the best home, you know. So he is the authority, the ultimate authority of what is right and wrong, and that's very arrogant. That's a very egoistic character talking in this particular story. So we need to understand that. And Muni is quite the opposite, you know. There's no ego there. And he is kind of very expansive. He just shares whatever information he has about his, cultural tradition, about his past. And he is also very curious to know whether this guy has children, you know, because he does that from the goodness of his heart, because he thinks that having progeny is a good thing, because that means that God's blessing is there on you. So he wants to find out about the good things in the American's life, whereas this guy doesn't even ask a single question about the family background of Muni. All he wants is the horse, and he very selfishly, he pretends to be interested in the 2 goats, you know, because he thinks that that's a good strategy. That's a good marketing strategy to please this trader called Muni into selling him the statue of the horse. So that's a very, very superficial, commercial, materialistic, egoistic, you know, self-centered American there, right there in the story. And Arcanine just, you know, takes him to pieces in that regard.
True. And while we were contrasting the attitudes, let's talk about the contrast between how they treat their women. Okay, their women is a very problematic term, but still.
Yes.
Their wives. He just, the foreigner is willing to let his wife travel alone. And it's kind of you don't know whether it's problematic or progressive, because he doesn't want to always see what she does, doesn't want to protect her as such. But while Muni, and we'll talk about the relationship of Muni and
Yeah,
her as
it's a bit complex because there are two cultures involved here, and each culture has a particular way of looking at its women, and both their perspectives could be complicated and problematic. So let's look at the American first, and he says that. Page 31 in my collection, Ruth will probably say, what about when we have a party? I'm going to keep him right in the middle of the room. I don't see how that can interfere with the party. We'll stand around him and have our drinks. Okay, so he says that Ruth may have a difference of opinion, but I'm going to have it in the living room. Okay, that's one thing. And he says later on when he's going to transport it, he says that Ruth can fly by air if she wants to. I will take the boat back. And again, he really enforces thinks that he will enforce his point of view. So that is the narrative that we have from him, and that could suggest his extreme independence, which can put his wife's wishes to the second place. The wife's wishes doesn't matter. Ultimately, he's going to have his way. So even this American with a liberal perspective about independence for the sexes and things like that is going to have his own way. So that's to be noted. So there's no equality of will applied in terms of the arrangement of the house, in terms of transportation and things like that, because we have this mistaken notion sometimes that equality is played out in all spaces and all spheres in the Western world. So that's not happening, at least in this narrative. And let's come back to Muni's home, where the wife, despite being thrashed at the beginning of their marriage a few times by Muni, now has the upper hand, right? And she is powerful enough to, talk back at him, shout at him, and ask him to go fast the entire day, and things like that. She is very rough, at least on the surface. She has the authority to shout at her husband, who's supposed to be the supreme being in her life, right? So externally, at least, she seems to be very powerful, and she's also very powerful in another sense, because she gets the food for the husband at the end of the day, by hook or crook. She goes and grinds corn in the big house and does something somehow, odd jobs here and there, and ultimately make sure that he has a decent meal. So she's also powerful in that regard. When Muni is not able to get some foodstuffs for the home. So if you compare these two, this one is the cleverer, smarter, and more productive in that sense, in that primitive sense of bringing food to the table, right? Yes. So we have two very interesting women characters. One is silent, almost non-present in the story. The Western woman doesn't appear at all. She's somewhere there in Delhi, in a hotel probably, and while the husband is just traveling across the continent, and that's one interesting thing. But apart from these issues, the sexual dynamics in the story is a bit complex too, because if you remember the gossip of the shopman and Muni, what happens there? Tell me about it.
He talks about the postman's wife eloping with somebody else, and after that the postman never being able to actually live with dignity. And it's again, a stereotype is being played out. If you can't protect your women,
yes, you have to keep an eye on the woman,
yes,
or else she'll sell the home or something like that. Yeah,
there was this very it was, I felt very it was very derogatory, and that's why I wanted to contrast the Western attitude with, here they say you should always have an eye, or else they would sell your home along with themselves, or something like that. Yes. While the Westerner, he just leaves her there and he comes here. So she could be doing anything.
Yeah, it's very, which is why I said that it's not a one-dimensional picture that we can derive it. It's very complex with various narrative trajectories running about. This woman, Ruth, is independent enough to stay on her own, do maybe her own, kind of sightseeing that she really likes, instead of just tagging along with the husband. And she she's also independent enough to make her way back on her own, which is very admirable, instead of just tagging along with the husband on the boat. So all these things are there, so that needs to be acknowledged as well.
And something which is very problematic is the gossip, which he uses it as a leverage. And he says, because he doesn't like the postman, let me just trash the postman more to get my whatever I want. So again, talking about somebody else to get what you need is extremely, I found it very problematic.
It's like manipulation on his part, quite a good deal of manipulation on his part, to get into the good books of the shopkeeper so that he could get the foodstuffs that would help him get his drumstick sauce at the end of the day.
And again, the shopkeeper hated the postman. And he talks about his wife.
Yes.
Which is again very...
So revenge is always about attacking the woman, the vulnerable, female, sex in a family. So that's there. And the other thing is that if you also remember, he says that you have enough of the imp in you to have a second wife. That's what the shopman says about Muni. And Muni laughs, again, to kind of affirm it so that he doesn't disagree with the shopkeeper. And that's very interesting too. But you have your second wife, so you can't do that. That's also very interesting. So at this age, generally speaking, when all these jokes are, not part of your usual discourse, and suddenly we have Muni placed in that context, makes us wonder about his younger self, and there's also this thing with the brother-in-law who apparently set fire to his house, and you also wonder, why does this brother-in-law set fire to his home? So what did Muni do to make him react in such a way? And all these things just come up in our minds when we think about Muni. So he's not a uncomplicated figure himself, and he also does a little bit of minor thieving too. I mean, that's the suggestion there, because if you remember the village headman being terribly angry with Muni because he suspects Muni of having stolen the pumpkin and the creeper and all, right? So there are slightly subversive discourses here and there about Muni, which are kind of marginalized to kind of highlight his pathetic, which is really true, pathetic situation of poverty and their barrenness. That's also very interesting. This couple is barren, right? And the entire village discriminates them because of that. And that's mentioned in the narrative too. So they do suffer this kind of discrimination because they are the odd ones out. They have nobody and they live on nothing. And in the past they were rich, but now they have fallen on bad luck, and so they have nothing to live on. So it's a really pathetic situation where getting a decent meal at the end of the day is itself very, very difficult.
And you were talking about the barrenness. So he talks to the shopkeeper about how his daughter will send him money. So why does he do that? What is his motive behind it?
That's very interesting because he himself again makes a reference to that. Let's
just clear this one thing. Does he really have a daughter?
No, he doesn't have any children. They are a barren couple, so which is why they suffer discrimination at the hands of the village folk. And they also say that they have nobody to look after, to think about. So why do they have to worry about anything? So it's almost as they've been totally ignored by the rest of the community, and some people even say that why don't they get rid of the two goats? It's good riddance for them. So they're completely without any kind of extended relatives or children. And on page 25 he says fertility brought merit. People with 14 sons were always so prosperous and at peace with the world and themselves. He recollected the thrill he had felt when he mentioned a daughter to that shopman, although it was not believed. What if he did not have a daughter? So he enjoys that fantasy, the momentary fantasy that he kind of creates to talk about a daughter sending money for his birthday. And that's also a very, very weird thing. In those days, in the 1960s, elderly people celebrating birthdays, it's a bit of a stretch in the villages when they hardly even know how to keep count of their ages. So it's again an exaggeration on his part, and the shopkeeper says 50th, you're more like 70. And he asks with a sneer, have you even a daughter? So that contempt there is for his barrenness, the lack of children, the inability to produce progeny, and that even has association with God not blessing you with his grace, so that you don't have children, so somehow you're in the bad books of God. So that's association
And
here.
again, when this is when this is an imagination, why does he imagine a daughter and not a son? Because here he says people with 14 sons were always so prosperous.
Yes, very good. Probably because it's the belief or the tradition in the Indian society that the daughters are the ones who are supposed to who will take care of the elderly parents, unlike the sons who might go after their wives and not look after the older parents. So that trajectory is also there, even though technically speaking they are the ones who have the money and the wealth, who are supposed to take care of the older parents according to religious guidelines and all. But when it comes to practical everyday stuff, it's the daughters who come by, check in on the older parents and things like that.
Or also there might be this again stereotype that the daughter leaves the house. If it was the son, then there would be a discourse where the parents did not raise him well enough to look after them, because the son stays in the house, and the doctor goes away, so they don't have to account for her absence.
Yes. So even the life will not be possible with a son, because a son is supposed to, as you say, will live with the parents, right? So only if it's a daughter, she will be away, out of sight, and still some money for this old man, which he'll get at the first of the month to pay off his debts. It's a charming lie, but it's, as you say, it's a very clever lie, but it is seen through by the people around him.
And Muni, he can be seen as a representative of the subaltern, the very poorest of the poor. And his attitude when he saw the khaki wearing man, he was scared. His first instinct was to be scared. And the khaki wearing man, they are the police who are supposed to protect them. What do you conclude from this? Again, this was written in the 1960s, soon after post-independent India.
Yes.
So do you think it's these are vestiges of colonialism, of how they were treated by the khaki-wearing men?
Yes, possible, very possible. You're quite right. So he thinks that he has come to investigate some crime, right? He's an inquisitor.
He didn't even know what he was being... He was just scared. That's all he was. After a point, somehow he came to the conclusion that he was talking about a dead body.
Yeah, so he as soon as he sees this man in khaki, he kind of thinks about the crime that he remembers, the latest crime, and that's about a mutilated body under a tamarind tree. And tamarind tree is also very interesting, right? Which has very supernatural associations and all. So a dead body underneath a tamarind tree between the two villages, in that liminal space, neither here nor there, in between space we have this body. And he talks about that crime, and he says that, I don't know anything about it, we don't know anything about it, our villages have a clean record, it perhaps it's the actions of somebody in the next village and things like that. He just spills the beans. So
very defensive attitude,
very defensive. And the immediate response is that the khaki wearing men would arrest people willy-nilly regardless of whether there is cause for such arrest or warrant. When he shows him the card, he thinks that that's a warrant for arrest, right? So he and people like him have no trust in the judiciary, which is represented by these khaki wearing men, and that could have these associations with the colonial regime of the British in India. So it could be a vestige of that inability to trust the men in power. That's there. On the contrast, he trusts the village pujari. He trusts him. He says that the village priest can look at the camphor flame and he can see the face of the criminal. So that trust in the local guardian is there, but there's no trust in this institutional figure of a policeman, of an inquisitor. And he always says, beware of the khaki. So he doesn't trust the man.
Again, it's...
And he keeps talking, right, as a strategy. That's a very, very interesting strategy. I can get my way out of this tricky, sticky situation through my talk. So the conversational skills somehow come to his rescue. Oh, that's what he thinks will happen, right?
That's again a stereotype, right? Of the... they don't even know what rights they have. They can resist arrest. They can ask for why they are getting arrested. They're very ignorant of all of these. And this shows that the people who are supposed to be protected, they feel more vulnerable and very... they feel vulnerable towards it, which is very problematic again.
Yeah, which reminds me of this, as you pointed out, I mean, conversation as a trick or a strategy. It reminded me of Homi Bhabha's theory of the sly colonial, right?
Yes.
The sly colonized, the sly subaltern who can work his way out of any kind of problem that, oppresses him or suppresses him. And Muni seems to be doing that here, talk his way out of the problem presented by this American, right?
True. And R.K. Narayan, he uses mythology quite a lot here and there. He just weaves it into the story.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the purpose for the mythological elements in the story?
Okay, so until the first half of the story, it's about Muni and his life and Greedom and his really difficult situation of having no food on a regular basis, and then he sees this American appearing on the highway, and he thinks that he is a policeman, and then he talks about all this crime and somehow tries to pack him off and send him on his way. So the first half is occupied in that context in this particular narrative. However, if you look at the second half of the story, and the second half begins with Muni getting a sense that this American is interested in the clay horse. He gets a sense of that, and then he starts to explain about the horse. And from that point onwards, he talks about the various religious beliefs and traditions of this local community. And as he's describing that, he just comes to his personal role as well, the role that he plays in these cultural traditions, in these in this traditional traditional narratives. And he kind of also talks about the role he plays in the local dramatics that they put up in the community, in the village community, and how he dressed up as goddess Lakshmi and Sita, and they always gave him women's parts because he has a soft voice. And that's also a very interesting thing, the fact that he got the women's roles rather than the men's roles is also very interesting and significant in that regard. Is he seen as a powerless figure in the village, which is why he has been kind of given all these roles. So that's something we can speculate on as well. So why he does that is that he gets some kind of glory out of that, some kind of reflected glory from this rich cultural traditional past, and through the small roles he plays. So he wants to assert that, perhaps, we don't know. And then from the personal, he also goes back to the religious epics, Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and he quizzes this man, do you know about that, do you know about this? And he talks about Krishna, the birth story of Krishna, and again about the demon that he destroyed. And again, the sexuality aspect plays a role there, how Krishna suckled on a demon and killed her eventually. So there's a lot of awe, there's a lot of power there. There's also a lot of joy, sexuality. It's a heady blend of all these various human emotions there in that rich narrative. And Muni is a great storyteller. He's a bard. And if you look at the story closely, he sometimes goes back home and tells his wife all the details that he has seen while he has been at the highway. So he is a storyteller in that regard, a very good storyteller. And the sad or the tragic part is that the American doesn't have any idea whatsoever about all the stories, but he enjoys the tone, the voice of Muni.
Again, you're talking about the tone and voice. His motive to come here was to explore cultures, is what he claims. But he doesn't want to understand the nuances or anything. No. He doesn't even know what language he's speaking. And it's very superficial admiration is what I think.
Yes.
It's a very, again, exoticized view of the East, where he just appreciates the tone. He doesn't even make an attempt to understand what the basic question of what language it is and why it or the rich cultural tradition associated with it.
Yes, I have similar interpretations of this perspective, and let me put it in a very, very simplistic way, in a black and white way. He's interested in the form rather than in the content. He doesn't know about the content. He doesn't care about the content. He really doesn't even want to know anything about it. He says, stop, I know what it is. I understand it. So when he hears Muni talk, the really nuanced way he utters all these words in the Tamil language, he says, I wish I had a tape recorder. I could record it and take it away. Again, the idea of a man just taking away the things he likes the looks of, or the sound of, the idea that his van can also take in an elephant Again, the idea of taking away the natural resource of this country, if you just take it to that level of interpretation. So the constant thing that seems to be in his mind is to take away stuff, take away things, interesting things, and this horse statue catches his eye, not his mind, it catches his eye, and then he wants to take it away. And he doesn't know the extent of the role that this horse plays in the lives of these villagers. In fact, the horse's statue is the only one that is not vandalized by the youth of the village. They don't scribble anything vulgar on it, whereas all the walls and even the tree trunks are scribbled on, even with the use of knives. And it's the only figure, the horse's statue is the only one that's kept pristine. That's because it has a spiritual value, which is why it has been protected. It's the guardian for them, and he takes away that guardian, right?
And you were mentioning the highway once or twice. So do you think it's a symbolism of modernity? He keeps staring at the highway, and he learns from the highway, and he goes back to his wife and tells her. So do you think it's a symbolism of sorts?
It is very symbolic in a very usual sense too, the sense that it represents modernity, because once the highway has come up on the landscape, the village moves away. Right, it has moved a few miles away from that space, from that horse itself. So maybe the horse represents the ancient tradition, the richness of the past, and how the village moving away from the statue of the horse is symbolic again of the intervention played by modernity and its impact on the villages, where they just give up their old values and move away. So all these associations are there, but more on an individual level. Let's look at that particular passage on page 25. So Muni is on his way to the highway, to the spot near the highway where he can graze his goats, and the cronies of Muni, they beckon at him, but he doesn't look at them. He says that I'm the poorest fellow in our caste, and no wonder that they spurn me, but I won't look at them either. So he passed on with his eyes downcast along the edge of the street, and people left him very much alone. And then further down, only on the outskirts did he lift his head and look up. So he doesn't feel very at home within the village. The outskirts give him the confidence to look at the rest of the world. It gives him a lot of peace. And that's a very ironic sense of peace, because there is nobody there. He can't have any kind of genuine bond with anybody. He just sits on the horse all day, looks at the vehicles passing down on the road. It's a very interesting state for him. He urged and bullied the goats until they meandered along to the foot of the horse statue on the edge of the village. He sat on its pedestal for the rest of the day. The advantage of this was that he could watch the highway and see the lorries and buses pass through to the hills, and it gave him a sense of belonging to a larger world. So he feels connected through the highway to the rest of the world, but he doesn't seem to have a lot of connection within his home space in the village. And that's because of his fallen fortunes, lack of children, and other things. So all the things that the village thinks as important for a person's self-worth is not there for him, which is why he looks at the larger world, and even though he's not able to relate to it at a personal level, he just enjoys being that dot on the map of the Indian subcontinent.
And one last question. Talking about how Muni was once a very rich person, and his wealth dwindled, and now he has 2 goats from 40 goats which he had before. Can we extrapolate it to the plight of India itself? Because India was once very rich in culture, tradition, and wealth as such, but the fall in the status was gradual. But once when everything went, we could see it was poor.
Yes.
So can a parallel be drawn between these two?
Yes, we can draw a parallel. In fact, the beginning of the story, the very beginning, the opening lines of the story has a connection to what you just mentioned. Of the 700,000 villages dotting the map of India, in which the majority of India's 500 billion live, flourish, and die, Kirtam was probably the tiniest, indicated on the district survey map by a microscopic dot, the map being meant more for the revenue official out to collect tax than for the guidance of the motorist, and so on. So the majority of the Indian population lives in the villages, and that majority, if we treat this village as a kind of a symbol, does suggest that the majority is poor, and just barely scraping out a living on the margins of society. So again, the loss in grandeur, wealth, and richness of the past, the village moving away from the horse's statue being one kind of indication, is kind of suggested there in the story, and it could have some connections to the colonial past, the past in which various invaders came and plundered and ruled the country. So it could be connected to that. And before we knew it, in the 20th century, we realized that we have lost everything. We have lost our wealth on so many different levels. So that is also kind of an interpretation that we can draw out from this particular story. And the word greedom, and as I said, let's go back to the first question that you asked, which suggests a lot of wealth and glory and power is no longer there. We're just hanging on to the vestiges of that past here and there.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Gayatri, for your questions. I hope you had a good time listening to this conversation. We'll continue in the next session.